there was an idea to bring together a podcast, to make them work together when they needed them to record trivia. And Phil Coulson died still believing in that idea. In a podcast to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the first Avengers film, Geek History Lesson Assemble! Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason Stars and Stripes Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. Welcome to your Mind University, because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or team from pop culture and teach you everything you need to know about them in about an hour, except this week because we're doing a movie retrospective.
Yes, we are doing a movie retrospective. We've done a lot of these guys on Lord of the Rings and various other superhero movies, and this is one that we could not skip. This is a movie retrospective celebrating the 10th anniversary of Marvel's The Avengers, which premiered on April 11th, 2012. It actually premiered open wide on May 4th, 2012. So we're right in that sweet spot in between the premiere and the general release. Can you believe it's been 10 years, Ashley?
No.
Well, the calendar says it is. So you have to believe it.
There should have been 10 Avengers movies between then and now.
Oh, you think so? Like the old James Bond movies? Like just pump them out?
I mean, honestly, compared to some of the other movies that came out, yeah.
That's very fair. That's very fair. Well, we also needed to assemble another podcaster that is of equal might. Some might call him Earth's mightiest podcaster. Please welcome our special guest today to talk about the Avengers. He is the co-host of The Morning Stream, Film Sack, and the only host of one of the best podcasts out there, Coverville. Please welcome Brian Ibbott. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Podcast smash.
Oh, are you the whole? Oh, should we decide that? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, Brian's always angry. That's how I think of Brian.
Right, yes, always angry. Yes,
Brian's the Hulk.
That's my secret.
Yeah, I'm definitely Captain America. There's just like no. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
no argument there.
Ashley, who do you think you are?
Whoever the tiniest, scaredest one is. So Loki, I guess.
You're the villain.
Yeah, I mean, look, according to the iTunes reviews, yes. I am the villain of this podcast.
I look forward to your sudden but inevitable betrayal on this podcast. Then,
yeah.
We're at the phase where you
in your eventual redemption. Don't forget.
Yes.
Look,
yes.
Also, if I'm Loki, that means I'm the hot one, and I'm willing to bear that cross.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining our team up here. You do a fantastic podcast, Film Sack, and I know you have very specific rules for what kind of movies you sort of talk on Film Sack, yes. But do you guys often do superhero films? Have you done many superhero films?
We've done a few. We did,
you did The Losers. You just did The Losers.
Oh, that's right.
Losers.
That's right.
Yeah,
DC comic
Losers. Based on a comic.
Yep.
Not really a superhero film, but definitely absolutely based on a comic. A lot of stuff that's based on comics that, doesn't quite fit into the superhero genre. But we've also done stuff like Watchmen. We did Hancock. I'm trying to think. We haven't done any of the... We've certainly never done any of the MCU films. I'm trying to remember if we've done the Eric Bana Hulk film.
Oh, the Ang Lee film. Yes.
I think we did because we wanted to do something superhero related or something Marvel superhero related, and we didn't, for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't feel like they're untouchable.
I agree.
I agree. It'll also be an interesting time period. I bet you in the next 10 years, I bet you guys will do an MCU movie. It'll be interesting to see which one you pick.
My guess, if I'm predicting it right now,
please.
I would guess Thor: Dark World, because it's kind of on the the maligned end of the spectrum. It's there's it doesn't really rely on crossovers as much as some of the other films, and I don't know. I feel like if there's one that we can kind of poke fun at, that's probably it.
I think it's a pretty solid choice.
Well, or enough time will pass and then nothing will be sacred and you'll just start at Iron Man and go forward.
That's right. That's right.
We were this close to doing Daredevil and Elektra, like back to back, 2 weeks in a row. And Netflix pulled them, or Hulu, whoever had them, pulled them right before we were going to watch them. And I'm kind of bummed. I was really looking forward to seeing those again because
I feel like you were done a service, though, honestly.
Look, I will say, as a person who owns the DVD of the Daredevil director's cut, that the director's cut is not that bad.
Really? I wonder if that's the one that they put on streaming. It'd be great if it is.
I don't know. I find it fills in the holes, but we're not here to talk about those kind of holes.
About filling holes.
We're here to talk about the Avengers, and also everybody will have more of Brian talking about what's some of his favorite comic book movies over at patreon.com/Jawiin. That's Jawiin over there. Don't forget, you can get 3 extra podcasts a month, GHL Extra, Jason and Ashley's Excellent Adventures, and Jason and Jeremy John about the Justice League. So support this pod, support all those pods over there, and thanks to all the super friends that do. Let's get into the 10-cent origin of Marvel's. That's right. The official title of this movie is Marvel's The Avengers. Ashley.
Versus like DC's The Avengers or Image Comics The Avengers.
Or the United Kingdom's The Avengers.
That's actually why it's that way, right? Because of the UK TV show that had a movie based on it.
That's right. Fun early fact, actually, in the United Kingdom and in most Commonwealth countries, this movie was actually called Avengers Assemble. To get rid of that confusion.
Well, Steve and Mrs. Peel are iconic, but also Avengers Assemble, better title.
Yeah, I agree. Let's hop into that 10-cent origin. Ashley, what is that?
That is the first part of the podcast where Professor Jason is going to tell you all the basics, who's its and what's its, in case you do go to an MCU-themed cocktail party and someone doesn't know who the Avengers are.
This film was directed and screenplay by Joss Whedon. Now, we're going to acknowledge the elephant in the living room right now. From this point forward, we shall call this man the director.
Mm-hmm.
And he has had a fall from grace since this film's released. We have found out that he's kind of a terrible person. And this will be the last time we mention him. I kind of understand why he was given this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think he did a good job with this movie, but the director is as far as we will talk about him going forward. He is a story by Zach Penn and the director. It stars, of course, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Tom Hiddleston, Clark Gregg, Colby Smulders, Stellan Skarsgård, Samuel L. Jackson, and a very undersung character actor that we'll talk about later in this podcast. The cinematography was by Seamus McGarvey. It was edited by Jeffrey Ford and Lisa Lezick. Music by Alan Silvestri, and I think the score to this movie is severely underrated. Of course, the premiere was April 11th in 2012. The wide release was May 4th, 2012 in the United States. Its budget was $220 million, and the box office was $1.5 billion. So I want to talk about all of our experiences seeing this in movie theaters, because I remember personally the anticipation for this movie was huge. And I would love to start with you, Brian, because I think the anticipation for this movie was a little bit of, when Marvel started making these movies about these solo heroes and they were dropping little hints about the Avengers, I think even the comic book fan and the moviegoers were all kind of like, they're never going to pull this off. This is never going to work. And I think this movie is the certification that it did. But what do you remember that time period of May 2012, the anticipation of like walking into this first sort of superhero team up movie?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's it. You nailed it. Because we'd seen Sony stumble severely whenever they tried to put too many heroes in a Spider-Man movie or too many villains in a Spider-Man movie. It felt bogged down. You barely got enough of this character. You got too much of this other character, and they really didn't feel like they could do that balance. And so, there was a lot of fear going into this. We'd gotten these great stories. We'd gotten these great individual vignettes that worked so well because they focused on the character. And there were all these different kinds of movies that focused on the character. The first moment, that stinger that you get at the end of the first Iron Man, when Nick Fury is hinting about the Avengers project. Obviously, you're thinking at that moment, wow, is it even possible they could do enough of these films to fill out an entire Avengers roster? Even like a small Avengers roster, not counting like the massive Avengers rosters that we've had over the years.
Yeah, the 25 member Avengers roster.
Exactly. Yeah, where there's the West Coast Avengers and the So going into this thing and knowing, all right, we've got our core group of characters that they're going to be focusing on. How are they going to focus, or how are they going to give enough attention to Hawkeye or Black Widow, neither of whom had a film centered around them? We had a brand new Hulk or brand new Banner, so we had to kind of get him introduced as well in a logical way. And how are you going to introduce a character in an ensemble piece and not feel like he's the odd man out where everybody else is somebody you've seen before? So a lot of fears going into this, and I saw it in a packed theater on the east side of Denver. Soon as tickets went on sale, you had to hurry to get them because they were getting sold out quickly. This feels like so long ago in that whole snatch up tickets for the big MCU film. But ever since then, it's been exactly the case. If you want to see it opening night, you better buy the tickets on opening
whenever their pre-order opens.
Exactly. Yeah. Packed theater. And the great thing about opening night with that is that everybody cheers, everybody, boos or gasps when they need to. There's nobody bored taking out their phones or chatting or anything like that. The crowd that goes to an opening night film is a crowd that cares about the movie and wants to see the movie and wants that experience. So I'll always stand behind opening night being the best night to see a film.
Ashley, how about you? What do you remember about seeing the Avengers in the lead up to this movie?
Well, most of what I remember about 2012 is being in university and not having to pay bills and really longing for that level of comfortability. So I
like the Avengers in Avengers 1 pre-Thanos.
Like the Avengers when Tony Stark was footing everybody's bills.
There you go.
Or S.H.I.E.L.D. I did not see Avengers opening night because I was not super hot on all of the Phase 1 Marvel movies.
Oh, interesting. Do you remember what one kind of knocked you down or stopped your anticipation?
I'll tell you the two that I liked.
Sure.
Out of Phase 1.
Yeah.
I really liked Thor. I thought Thor was amazing because I thought Thor was going to be terrible.
You love them Dutch angles.
I love Loki, as already established.
Oh, there you go. Fair.
Look, I was a girl on Tumblr.
All right, that's fair.
All Loki and Cumberbatch all the time. And I liked the first Captain America. Mm-hmm. Those were the two that I liked. I had not seen Iron Man, and I had seen half of Iron Man 2, and I saw the Hulk in preparation for the Avengers, and was like, this is fine. It's not even the same guy.
Nope.
And I wanted to bring that up too because the Avengers was cool. Or was it, we were in anticipation of it, like Brian said, because no one had ever done it before. We didn't, the Marvel Phase 1 pedigree was not what the MCU pedigree is now.
No. I remember being the only guy excited for the first Iron Man movie in my group of friends because I was a huge Iron Man fan. And my other friends kept saying that D-lister, that was literally what they would say to me.
Yeah. And I had never read an Avengers comic because I was firmly the X-Men is the only Marvel team I'm interested in. I will not be reading Avengers. So I was Avengers, whatever, I guess. This will be fine. And then everyone at school kept saying it was really good. So I saw it either the second or third weekend, and it blew my socks off. It was amazing, of course, particularly for the time. Rewatching it for this podcast, it's almost quaint compared to what the MCU does now.
Yeah.
But about 2 or 3 months later, the AMC in Burbank, California, the one that's in the little mall, because there's 2 AMCs in Burbank, they ran a marathon of all the Phase 1 movies again, because it was right when the movie was close to $1 billion.
And when you could stomach a movie marathon because it was only 5 movies.
Yeah. And then we had a half an hour break after the first one, and then an hour break. And people were running out to the food court to eat. And then you finished with Avengers played at midnight.
Oh, nice.
So it was an all-day event. And then I also did the same thing when the Dark Knight Rises came out, and then I've never done it and will never do it again.
All right.
It's a big commitment to see that many movies in, one right after another.
I knew a couple people who did it when Age of Ultron came out, and it was a 2-day event, and I was couldn't be me, fam. Absolutely not.
Wow.
I know a person that did it for Infinity War, and I think at that point it was 16 movies. It was
so it wasn't just Phase 3 they were watching before.
No, was it all?
It was all of them. It was like a 2-day thing at the El Capitan here in Los Angeles, and I couldn't believe it because some of the movies would play at like 3 a.m. and I'd be like, "You're gonna sleep through half these movies," you know. I
mean, arguably, there's some that you should sleep through, depending on your tastes.
I remember at the time that was the thing of like, which movie do you take a nap for? And I remember the debate was between. I think some people were like, "It's Ant-Man," some people were like, "It's Thor: Dark World," some people were like, "Take the nap early at Iron Man 2."
Yeah.
Right.
All right, Jason, tell us about your experiencing Avengers.
So I did see this midnight opening night, and I saw it at the Sherman Oaks ArcLight here in Los Angeles.
We were all so young.
Because I was skeptical about Marvel until Thor.
Mm-hmm.
Thor was the movie where I said, okay, if they can pull off Thor, they can do anything.
You said, if George Kirk can do this, I believe in the MCU.
Basically, yeah, because like I liked Thor comic books, but I almost thought that they were so complicated for the layman. And then I thought Thor 1 did a really good job of making it very accessible. And once they did that, I was like, oh, they can do the Avengers no sweat. They'll be able to pull it off. I also, as we talked about at the director, as we said earlier, the director at this time has a very good pedigree.
Yes, very, very hot in the space.
And in terms of the fan space, we might forget this now, but at the time when he was announced, it was huge.
Yeah.
Everybody was very excited about him being connected to this film. So I went in with mega level expectations for this movie. And I think this movie at the time met them and exceeded them, which really blew me away. All right, so let's talk about this movie. Of course, you know, we start off this movie. We're in outer space. Also, this movie starts out with a voiceover, which is always worrisome. Always, you know.
But also, Lord of the Rings starts with a voiceover.
That's fair.
But so does 2011 iconic The Green Lantern.
That's fair, but this movie, this movie starts out with a lot of gobbledygook of like the Tesseract has awakened.
They didn't trust that people had seen the previous 5 movies.
No, but we basically start off with Brian, what did you think about the main villain of this movie being Loki? Which kind of surprised me at the time.
It surprised me too. I mean, you get this tease of Thanos, and you've gotten him a couple times. I think the end of Thor, you get him a little bit, and you get at the end of one of the is it one of the Iron Man movies? You get him as well.
I don't know about that, but you could be right.
Trying to remember all the stingers kind of.
There's too many of them.
Too many of them. But Loki, a character that we've been introduced to already, and was an enemy that got bested in a one-on-one film.
Exactly.
You're thinking, oh, okay, this should last like 5 minutes, right? Because he's got Thor and all the Avengers.
Where he knows Achilles' heel, yes.
Right, exactly. But, bringing in the Chitauri, bringing in these other aspects, and even turning some of the Avengers against the Avengers, I think is the only way you can kind of do it and still make Loki feel like a new threat as opposed to just a recycled solo Thor threat.
So, fun fact about this movie, in doing the research for this podcast, I learned that Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige wanted Thanos to be the villain of this movie.
Oh, really?
And it was the director who convince them not to do that.
I think that was the right. I mean, look, we would have loved if former GHL podcast guest Damien Poitier had played Thanos in a meaningful way instead of simply with the iconic glare at the camera. Yeah. But he's still the first actor who's ever played Thanos in live action, which is very, very cool. But I think Thanos was too big. I think Loki was actually the right choice.
The director's own word says that he did not like Thanos as a villain. And so he was like, I just didn't want to do him. So he was like, he came up with the idea that Thanos would be like the puppet master and that there would be an army. And he was actually the one that pushed for Loki in terms of honoring that the first Avengers comic book villain is Loki.
That's true. But Loki, again, like I referenced Tumblr earlier, Loki was the biggest thing that came out of the first phase of the MCU.
So are you happy with Loki as the main villain of this movie, Ashley, and leading the army of Chitauri?
Absolutely. Of not Skrulls? Yes.
Yeah.
Because this was also the height of Marvel. Stan Lee had sold off all of the rights to different studios.
Yes.
And so I was like, where are the Skrulls?
They couldn't use the Skrulls. They could not say the Skrulls.
Yeah.
Because they was owned by 20th Century Fox, who had the Fantastic Four characters, and the Skrulls are considered. And the Chitauri actually comes from, it's a name created by Mark Miller for the Ultimates, which are the Ultimate Avengers. Yeah. Okay, so it's interesting that for an Avengers movie, like we start out in space and then we get this whole section of the movie that is from basically the perspective of S.H.I.E.L.D. It is a who's who of S.H.I.E.L.D. where it's like Nick Fury and Dr. Eric Selvig, and that's where we get our introduction of Hawkeye. And I want to talk about Ashley. What did you think about, because this is an interesting thing that the MCU basically abandons after phase 2. A lot of the phase 1 movies have a POV of S.H.I.E.L.D. and this organization that is trying to control the heroes. I want to talk about, what did you think about this in this movie, that we spend so much time with S.H.I.E.L.D. before we meet any of the Avengers? And then Ashley, I just want all the podcast listeners to hear your thoughts on Maria Hill. This is the first live action appearance of Maria Hill.
Right? Well, so I don't care for S.H.I.E.L.D. in general. S.H.I.E.L.D. is not my jam. Secret government agencies, cops on steroids, just not my jam ever.
Cops on steroids.
I don't care for Nick Fury. I don't really care for Maria Hill. Okay. And the thing that would have made me care about Maria Hill would have been casting a different actor than the lady from How I Met Your Mother.
I knew you were not a fan of Colby Smulders.
I don't have an issue with her as like a human being or as a performer, but Maria Hill, in my opinion, I really have to believe could kill me with her bare hands. And Colby Smulders plays this kind of like she's in an episode of How I Met. It's lighter. Which fits with the director's tone, and it does fit. I will say
she's friends with the director, is why she got cast.
Yes, and it does fit with the tone of the script. Like, I'm not like, this is an Ashley problem. This is not a problem with the movie. Sure. But I do, of all of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who I don't care for, Maria Hill is the best of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents I don't care for. So I was glad that she was introduced and that we got at least one other woman in the room in this movie.
I will say, this is something that I miss about the MCU.
The cops?
S.H.I.E.L.D.'s involvement?
Exactly, Brian. I love Nick Fury, and I also love Nick Fury is kind of evil, and he's evil in this movie in a lot of ways, where he's manipulating the hell out of the Avengers in this movie. And Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury is perfect casting because it's from the Ultimates.
He's a great casting choice, and it's cool that he wanted to play Nick Fury, and like, it's cool when people get to do their dreams. It's really nice.
Sure. What do you think, Brian? What did you think about, like, I kind of liked having S.H.I.E.L.D.'s presence throughout this movie, and I kind of miss that S.H.I.E.L.D. basically doesn't exist in this universe anymore.
I do too. Yeah, I'm eager for what they do with Sword and Secret Invasion and the satellite that Nick Fury is kind of working on up there. But S.H.I.E.L.D. to me is the focusing agent, right? You've got all these heroes with all these powers, and they're they're different goals, and they're different individual battles that they fight, not just villains, but also their internal ones. S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of acts like that funnel, that focusing ray that says, okay, you've got the wallflower thing going on, or you've got this, like, you're trying to figure out what this new world is that you're part of, and you're a fish out of water here too, and you're just angry all the time. Let's focus you guys in on one specific task, get that one done, then focus you on this other. Like, it's S.H.I.E.L.D. is the best project manager you could ever ask for. And yeah, I've totally missed him in phase 3, in the beginning of phase 4. I'm hoping that we get a resurgence back, or that S.H.I.E.L.D. makes some sort of come back in later films, but it sure doesn't look like anything like that's going to happen with the Multitude of Men, or the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, I have a weird stealth theory.
White guy Nick Fury in Multiverse of Madness?
No. Well, possibly, yes. But my stealth theory is that Secret Invasion that is kind of seeming to be the new S.H.I.E.L.D. show. And again, like, I love making predictions, because apparently, like, a couple years ago, I predicted the entire plot of Thor Ragnarok and didn't even realize it. Wow. And our listeners were like, oh my God. So this is my prediction for Secret Invasion. I think Secret Invasion is the handoff show where Nick Fury retires. And we're gonna pick whoever.
And we have Jimmy Woo run the show.
Maybe
Jimmy Woo. Honestly, Randall Park Supremacy is fine by me.
Or it might be Emilia Clarke, because we know she's in that show.
Oh, that's true.
You know, it might be her. But like, that's what my prediction. But yeah, I agree with you. I hope they make Sword. Like, I hope it comes back with a vengeance.
Look, Sword is of all of the secret cops in Marvel, Sword is the coolest secret cops.
The secret cops. Well, then this movie, it's interesting. This movie goes into, you know, sort of the banding the team together. We get all these vignettes with the different people. We get Romanoff in Russia. We get Hulk in India. We get Captain America still boxing. Apparently he's been boxing for like 5 weeks now.
I would love to ask a question around that.
Please.
What is everyone's like favorite character intro?
Ooh, Brian.
That's such a great question.
What's your favorite one, man?
It's got to be Black Widow. I mean, she's sitting there having a conversation. She, from all external appearances, is outmatched. She's, you know, tied to a chair. She has no way out of the situation. Yet she's convinced, and she's absolutely right to be convinced, that she is in charge of this. She's getting the Russian guy to, I can't remember the character, but she's getting him to confess everything, and she's carrying on a phone conversation, and don't pull me out of this. And it's just great to watch her kind of turn everything around and then become the integral to the character introduction for Mark Ruffalo's Banner.
See, that's my favorite one.
I like the Hulk introduction.
It's Bruce Banner's one, because I like the idea that they tricked him. And I think that's really smart. And then also there's this very subtle thing, and I don't know whether it was Mark Ruffalo's choice or the director's choice, but in the scene he's talking about how, you know, he's like, oh, the Hulk is like stolen everything from me and it doesn't give me the life that I want, and he doesn't get what he wants. He's rocking a baby cradle with this idea. And I was like, oh, wow, what a subtle way to tell your audience to be like, he wanted a family, like a normal life, and he can never have it now.
Yeah.
Interesting. I did not catch that. That's great.
It's so subtle, but that's what makes me think it might be a Mark Ruffalo choice, where he saw this prop and he's like, I'm going to go over there and like kind of like screw around with it. But it's
clearly none of us read the script.
That actually, I did read the script. That is not in there. So
it was probably an on-set choice. That's interesting.
It was definitely an on-set choice. So there's a bunch of stuff, like most scripts. It's very generic and vague. And then I imagine the art director put that cradle on there. And then either the director or Mark made the choice.
Yeah.
But that's my favorite one, because it's an interesting way to deal with the Hulk. And I like that this is the start of, because they definitely could have in the MCU kept the Hulk is, he's a villain. They could have kept it going for like another 10 movies. And I kind of like that they were like, no. We're going to try something different. What's the thing that's different that you've never seen? The Hulk being a hero.
Right.
So we're going to give Bruce Banner a little bit more control. And every once in a while, he's going to go crazy, but he's not going to go bonkers every single time. So Ashley, you said Incredible Hulk as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think that scene is good because along with Hawkeye, I think it has the most heavy lifting to do. Like, yes, the Incredible Hulk movie exists, but for all intents and purposes, just like when a new creative team comes on, like it's a soft reboot of this character.
Brian, what were you going to bring up, sir?
Oh, just the fact that this is such a great beginning without us even knowing it. It's such a great beginning to Bruce and Natasha's friendship that you see so well in some of the later films, and you know. It's you know, she's the one who calms him down in Ultron and
oh yeah, what is it, like baby go to sleep or something like that?
Exactly, yeah.
Hey big guy.
Oh hey big guy.
It's flirting or it's calming him down? It's one of the
Why
two.
not both?
Why not both?
I would have really liked them to get together in universe. I thought it would have been really nice.
Well, technically they did. It just happened off camera.
Well, I just want more kissing, I guess.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's what Captain America and Tony are for. That's all the kissing.
There you go.
All right, so you know, we get the band together and we get to like one of my favorite moments in the movie, and this is one of my favorite moments in the movie because this is a moment that I never thought we would ever see in live action as a comic book fan. And also this was another moment when this movie did it, I was like, wow, this movie is fantastic. The helicarrier. And the introduction of the helicarrier where the two were like, it's Bruce Banner and it's Captain America on the deck and Black Widow's like, hey, you guys better back up. And then the Alan Silvestri score soars and so does the helicarrier. And the helicarrier also doesn't look dumb. It's really a good design.
Yeah. It's got some mass. It's got some weight. It's not just this like invisible jet popping up into the air.
Yes, and I also like they took it's so interesting that listeners, if you've ever read any of the Ultimate Universe of Marvel Comics, you really get the sense how much this movie owes to those comic books and how much they owe to the Ultimates, because the design of the helicarrier just basically being an aircraft carrier that flies is exactly from that book. And it's such a smart Brian Hitch is that artist. It's such a smart redesign because at the time the comics helicarriers sort of look like this like weird Star Trekian curve design. They just look strange
almost. Or,
yes,
yeah.
They like and they had like these.
Blimp.
It would look like a tourist vehicle. These giant windows were like, welcome to the observation deck.
Right.
Whereas the aircraft carrier like seems tactical. But the helicarriers also were rewatch. I start having problems with this movie because I can still to this day, and I see it now. I remember when I bought the Blu-ray to this movie, not even 4K, just the 1080, 1920, HD resolution. Watching the Blu-ray, the minute they get to the helicarrier, as a person that has worked in post-production, there are so many green screens. And there are so many green screen shots in that helicarrier that it's almost, for me, I was like, it bumped me the first time I ever watched it on Blu-ray. And it bumped me because I was like, there are so many green screen shots, which either tells me one thing, that the minute they got to the helicarrier, either the helicarrier was not as big of a set as we thought it was, or
I think that's what it was. I think they built tiny sections and redressed them.
Well, my other prediction was either or this part of the film was a lot of reshoots.
I mean, also a very high possibility. It's funny because we've evoked the Ultimates a couple of times now. And I started working in a comic book store not too long, the next year after Avengers came out. And for a good 3 years, I could tell people, well, if you like the Avengers movie, like you really need to read the Ultimates because they just stole like this movie should have been called the Ultimates. In a lot of, except the Hulk doesn't need people in this.
And there's no Freddie Prinze Jr. cameo.
Or spousal abuse.
That's right. Okay, so then we get to, I think, everybody's favorite section of the movie. I'm making a joke. Loki goes to the opera.
Oh yeah. I mean, that scene is iconic. Like Neil, puny human, tiny humans, whatever. Like that speech is iconic.
Yes, and I like the idea of the Holocaust survivor standing up to him. So let's talk about this. This is Iron Man meeting Captain America. This is them against Loki. This is basically Steve's first time in the modern day. Brian, are you a fan of this Avengers 1 Captain America suit?
No.
I don't know anybody that is.
So glad you asked that. Yeah, it just feels so 70s motorcycle Captain America.
Oh, the rubber ears.
The rubber ears. Man, I'm so glad the things they did in later movies to make the costume look great, and the different ornamentation that they added to it or took off of it in some cases. But this one feels like a little form-fitting spandex suit. And if we learned anything from Wolverine on the Blackbird, spandex and superheroes probably don't mix in movies. And
I know, I remember seeing this suit and just hating it immediately. Like they're trying to do comic book Avengers Captain America, but it's so funny because like I love the suit from the first Avenger, the denim World War II suit.
Yeah.
And I wish that was the suit he was wearing in this movie because in the very next movie, they go back to something that's sort of a mix between the Avengers 1 suit and the first Avengers suit. And it's like, oh, that looks great. Yeah. And a lot of it to me is the helmet because again, we keep talking about how much this movie owes to the Ultimates. making Captain America's helmet a military combat Kevlar helmet is the most genius idea of all time.
Totally is. Yeah, because that's what you would do. You'd want your head protected. You wouldn't want it just held there with some Lycra.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it looks like it's like weird blue felt. So his suit is made out of. Whereas the other versions feel like, it's body armor of some type, or it has protection. So yeah, this is like the big part where like Iron Man shows up. It's a great introduction, of course. AC/DC. He comes in the speakers, and then Thor shows up and like basically hammers the Quinjet out of the sky. There's a great line in here where Iron Man goes off and after Thor and Loki, and Cap, of course, just grabs a suit or grabs a parachute, which is later contradicting a later movie. The very next Captain America movie, he's like, I don't need to shoot. But there's a great line in here where Natasha says something about like, they're gods, Cap. And Captain America goes, I'm pretty certain there's a god and they don't look like them. And then he jumps out of the plane.
There's only one. Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is a perfect encapsulation of that character. But Ashley, I want to hear about your thoughts about about
Tony Stark's music taste. It's all bad. It's dad rock.
Well, he is a
50-year-old man.
He's in his late 40s in this movie. So, so it fits. No, I was going to say, what did you think about, of course, this is the classic superhero cliche of the heroes all meet and then they fight until they learn that they're friends.
Well, here's two thoughts. My snarky thought is, yes, they're men. Have you met men? And then my
I have not. What are they like?
Well, you guys are doing pretty good right now. So congrats on that.
All right.
Because you've met before.
Yeah, I am going to team up episode. We had our fighting episode.
I am on after this podcast. I am going to drive to Colorado and find Brian and shake my fist at Brian.
Exactly.
Outside the window. I'm just going,
and then go climb a mountain somewhere. I don't mind this as a trope. I don't mind. Like, I was not mad that Batman v Superman was called Batman v Super, that they were going to fight. Because for characters like Iron Man or Batman, I'm like, yeah, that seems like you'd punch first and ask questions later. But I do understand that in the ethics of superhero ethics are pretty black and white. So you're like, but you're all good guys. So you should all good guy together versus good guying separately. But this fight is pretty cool. And they actually let you see a good amount of it. We don't get like a ton of shaky cam on the VFX until Age of Ultron. So I actually like this moment for what it does in the movie. And I understand that they probably had a mandate to have an action set piece somewhere in the second act.
And I bet they were like, we have to have them fight here because they're going to be fighting the aliens at the end. Brian, what did you think of this fight?
Yeah, same thing. This for me, it encapsulated the Avengers right down to, a few minutes of film. Not the fact that they were fighting each other, which of course, kind of is not the Avengers deal, but just the Avengers, the comic book, the Tony Stark's black and white view of everything. All right, if you can't be controlled, you must be stopped. Captain America's almost defensive approach, and then Thor's no, I need to stop my brother, but you guys have no idea what you're dealing with. You need to get out of my way, kind of thing. It's such a great three directions, three unique characters and three unique directions that had to be done as a conflict like this. And I don't want to jump ahead to the moment when Mjolnir hits the shield, but my gosh,
please.
That's kind of the thing you want. You want to see it's that what if, like, all right, who would win in a fight? Is it Captain America? Is it Thor? What, shield versus hammer? What's going to happen?
It also heralds some of the conflict that comes kind of Captain America Civil War onward between the Avengers when we get to the infighting. Like, we are seeing, I don't know if it's probably a happy accident or if it was maybe in the zeitgeist.
Or maybe it's influenced by this.
Someday we'll do Civil War, but we're kind of setting up those allegiances, and we echo it even in like the Wakanda fight in Infinity War. Like, they show up at the same time and they do a lot of similar moves. And I think that's really interesting. But that's also, when you have someone like Kevin Feige who kind of oversees everything, you can say, hey, when this was the first time they fought, let's reference that.
There's two moments in this fight too that I can remember specifically in theaters thinking, wow, I can't believe I'm watching this. And the first one is there's a CGI shot where Thor has Iron Man by the collar or by the collar, his collarbones of his suit, and he is dragging him up the side of a mountain. And I was like, oh my God.
Yes.
And then right before they cut to the helicarrier, there is a shot of the three of them in a triangle of Cap, Iron Man, and Thor. And I remember seeing that shot being like, wow, I can't believe I'm watching a movie where Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor are all in the same frame of film, which I thought was pretty amazing.
And feel evenly matched.
Yes.
That's the thing. They can do whatever they want as far as loosening a hero's strengths or building up a hero's power to make them more compatible. But this felt like, no, these guys are, they each have their strengths, in whether it's cunning or just flat out power or defense. And to make them feel like this was an even fight that could have gone any of three ways, and apparently went a fourth with them unconscious on the ground afterwards, is a great testament to the writing and how well this is written.
That's correct. And then the movie cuts away to what I want to bring up as the worst movie cliche of all time. But first, this. All right, everybody, let's talk about what I think is the worst movie cliche of the last decade, and also happens in this film. Loki intentionally getting caught. Because
Jason's favorite trope of all time.
I hate this. And this, look, I know it happens before this movie because the Joker does it in The Dark Knight, but this is the movie.
Sherlock also does it.
Yeah.
And then.
But this is the movie that I think.
It feels like, I was going to say James Bond and maybe half a dozen of the films.
I feel like
Infiltrate Spectre,
for the last decade, I feel every movie has been doing it because of this movie. Because like Loki, again, it never makes sense for the villain to get caught, ever. But like Loki's whole plan is he's like, well, if I can get on the helicarrier, they're all going to lose. And a lot of his plans, I think, are very... this helicarrier plan is all a lot of luck and convenience, I think,
It is. Yeah.
Now you can look into that. You can correct a lot of it, that maybe the Mind Stone, is that what it is? The Tesseract was influencing people more than we think. But I mean, what do we think about this section of the movie? Because a lot of people would call this section of the movie, like where Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow, gets a win on Loki, because she like successfully reverse interrogates him. A lot of people call this this is one of her best moments in the entire MCU. Are there any moments in this period of the helicarrier? Basically, the Avengers all start like sniping at each other for like 20 minutes. What do you think about this?
It's interesting because this is a literal echo of the previous action scene that we were just talking about, but this is sort of your psychological version of it. And we like to see people fight each other, which is why we like YouTube culture.
Oh, all right.
But there are a lot of jokes here. And there are a lot of jokes that carry on throughout the MCU history. And it's funny because a lot of people, myself included, will point to the Guardians of the Galaxy and the inclusion of James Gunn as the tonal shift in the MCU, where everything got a lot more comedically driven, but I think it's moments like this that actually start it. And I actually think Cap has a really interesting arc throughout this little scene.
Oh, you mean where he's kind of like, let's follow orders, and then he finds the gun and he's like, screw you, Shield.
Yeah. But like, I don't know. I'm such a sucker for like Captain America.
There is an interesting piece in this section that I do want to bring up. That is specifically because you brought up Captain America, Ashley. That I think Marcus and McFeely, the writers of Infinity War and Endgame and Captain America: Civil War, I think they saw this scene and they were like, this is the arc.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a line in this where they're all like getting mad at each other, and Cap is getting right up in Tony's face. And Cap says to Tony, "You're not the man to make the sacrifice play." And I think because of that line, I think that's the only reason Iron Man dies in Endgame. I think Marcus and McFeely saw that scene and they were like, Iron Man has to die. You
don't think that his contract was up and they said, we will not be renewing this again?
I think that is, I think they went to Endgame intentionally to kill him, but I think the how they killed him, because he does sacrifice himself in Endgame, is because of this line.
Interesting.
Which to me, that just says that Marcus and McFeely are good writers, man. Looking at the
redemption,
ones. Yeah, good. Brian, what stands out to you from the Avengers sniping act?
Two great lines that, just totally speak to Ashley's point about the comedic shift. And boot, just, such a great moment. Nick Fury talking about how with just the push of a button, the little box that Loki's in can just drop out of the helicarrier to the ground. And then I'll never play Galaga without thinking about the dude on the helicarrier playing Galaga.
So fun fact, apparently that line was improvised. And then
I believe it.
They added the shot like last minute of the guy playing Galaga.
That and the shawarma scene, I know, are like legendarily like the add-ons.
But a friend of mine was the guy that did the Galaga VFX.
Oh, wow, nice.
Really?
Yeah. I remember he was a guy I worked on a couple shoots with, but I remember once where I was like, oh, what have you done in the past? And he was like, well, my biggest claim to fame is I did the Galaga shot in Avengers.
Like, would never make sense to anybody outside of the film. You can say, oh, yeah, I did a VFX thing where somebody's playing a video game.
Yep. Yeah. But yeah, I forget about that. Yeah, this is where, with the...
is that the same friend who did our VFX for Retro Diaries?
It is.
Hey.
It is. The Galaga shot is pretty amazing. But yeah, this is where like Tony Stark says Point Break. This is where Captain America is like, I understood that reference.
I still use that GIF all the time.
But then there's also like, you can also, this is, I think you can start telling the yucks of the MCU because they double down on this a lot in future movies. But there's also like...
This is also where they established Tony Stark as the greatest villain of the MCU.
Because he hacks the helicarrier?
Yeah.
Well,
and he's mean to literally everyone.
He is mean
He's the
to
greatest nickname generator ever, though.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. It's also the adopted joke kind of doesn't work in this movie. Thor's like, he's adopted.
Oh, yeah. He's my brother. Well, he killed however many people. He's adopted. That's because Chris Hemsworth is good at one thing, and it is standing there and looking handsome.
And probably said, hey, we need to give some comedic lines to Thor. You got anything?
Yeah. Taika wasn't there yet. We hadn't figured it all out.
Let's talk about here the death of Phil Coulson.
The best moment in the movie.
I agree. Brian, what do you think about this? Good choice to kill him? How do you feel about it? Was presented?
I thought you were going to say good choice to kill him. Excellent choice to kill him.
Excellent choice to kill him.
It does propel things, right? Because the bond that he had been starting to develop with Captain America, obviously his connection with Nick Fury and by proxy Hawkeye and Tony Stark. They still figure out a way to bring him back because it's Marvel and it's superheroes and it's Coulson, and Waikiki is a beautiful place. But it's a powerful moment. They really needed a catalyst for the third act, or for the continuation of the third act, and you're not going to kill off any of the majors. You've got to kill off kind of the B list of the film, and that's where Coulson sat.
Ashley, how do you feel about Coulson's death or non-death?
It's the best part of the movie. No, he died.
Yeah, you don't consider Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. canon?
I don't. Kevin Feige. I don't consider it
exactly
Agents
like
of canon.
Kevin Feige doesn't consider it canon.
Look,
why should we?
I already told you I don't like S.H.I.E.L.D.
I better correct myself. Tahiti, not Waikiki.
Someone already tweeted you, and I apologize.
I know. That's so quick.
Look, I know I have friends that worked on that show, and I like a couple seasons of that show, but
it gets really interesting once they become Inhumans.
If the head of the MCU doesn't consider it canon, I don't know why I should either.
It is tough though, because Clark Gregg is such a wonderful actor, and it kind of sucks to nerf him. And then this early, but it's the best moment in the whole movie, and the kick works, and like Nick Fury being a scheming scumbag really works, and like the Cap arc is so great. And then Coulson, in my opinion, while I have been happy to see him again, it will never surpass this moment.
Which is, I think it's the whole reason they've never brought him back, because he was the one person that I actually was very surprised in Endgame did not show up.
Yeah.
But I think they're like, no, if he shows up, the Avengers, the whole arc of the Avengers doesn't work. So they have to always believe that he's dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's the whole reason why they'll never reverse it. You know, you were Ashley, you brought up the amazing moment. One of my favorite moments in this movie is the Nick Fury scene where he throws down the bloody trading cards in front of Cap, and it's like Coulson had those in his pocket. And then later they leave, and Maria Hill says they were in his locker. And then you learn that, and they don't go any further on it. But like, to me, I'm like, oh, so Nick Fury went to the locker, got the cards, dipped them in Phil Coulson's blood.
Yes.
Into his blood.
Yes.
Right.
Look, it might not have been Phil Coulson's blood. It might have been.
Blood.
It might have been his.
He probably
blood.
has like a pint of blood in his pocket somewhere.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe he's a vampire. You know, those are, you know, Morbius is new, so there's vampires in this universe now. But that's the thing. Like, that's where I was like, oh, this guy is an ends justifies the means.
Yes.
You know, kind of guy. I love that. I was like, ooh, that's dark. That's dark. Before we get to the Battle of New York, before it's all full of CGI, I just want to give a shout out to my friend, the Galaga VFX artist. His name is Joel Gerlach. I wanted to make sure it was okay to say his name in the podcast before I did. So Joel Gerlach, every time you watch Galaga, that was him. All right. So we get to what I actually think is the greatest scene in the movie, everybody. The real lead actor of this movie shows up. And that is character actor Harry Dean Stanton as abandoned warehouse security guard who asks Bruce Banner, "Are you an alien?" Which I think is 100% a nod to his role in Ridley Scott's Alien.
Right, of course. Yeah.
But it's kind of a weird scene. But he's like, I put pants on you, or something like that. But like, I love that Harry Dean Stanton is in this movie.
Right.
in like this silly, he must have been an Avengers fan or a Marvel fan or something like that, and been like, I'll do anything.
What I think it is because Harry Dean Stanton is in and he's a late actor, Harry Dean Stanton. Great. Go Google him. He's in like every movie of all, like he's in everything. He always shows up in these bit things. I think this was intentional by the director to put him in there to be like, well, if he's in here, we're a great movie.
I mean, it's true. It's just a scientific fact.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Battle of New York. It's basically become, I mean, now it kind of seems cartoony. It seems simple, but like,
again, it seems quaint compared to every other time they've protected the entire planet. But it's
just a city. They do a whole country in one, and they do the entire planet in another one.
Yes, and it's because like
real
it was
escalation.
Right, exactly.
It was the first time we kind of saw, a team versus an army in one of these superhero movies. Because like X-Men was always like, it was like 1-to-1. Like they always like put the people off to the side.
Look, but X-Men also had to protect New York because it's Marvel, and that's the center of the universe.
That's fair. But this was like the first time where they were like, they're in public, they're on a city street, there are people everywhere, and there's an army of aliens. Brian, what do you think? What from the Battle of New York stands out to you? What doesn't work nowadays? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, what works is maybe a continuation of my thoughts on the fight between Cap, Iron Man, and Thor. Is that all right? Now you've got to make each one of these characters viable against an army, and easy to do with Iron Man, easy to do with Thor. A little bit harder with Captain America, but he's got the shield. He can throw it around. He's
ordering cops around, and they're like, "Who are you, buddy?"
Exactly. Very easy. He punches one of these big these big space slugs. But then you've got to figure out, all right, how are we going to get Black Widow? How are we going to get Hawkeye to be relevant and not feel like, all right, why don't you guys just hang out in this little corner? We'll take care of this part, and if you see anything getting away that we miss, you take care of that. But having Natasha take over one of the flying ships, and having this moment that we get with Hawkeye, that we get again in the Hawkeye series, where he's firing arrows, jumping off a building, and just the amazing work to make him a viable and amazing or a powerful enough character to go up against an army. That's a neat trick. That's a great magic trick to pull off with characters whose powers are, I can see really good and I'm kind of agile.
Ashley, how about you? What from the Battle of New York stands out to you?
The circle shot, of course.
Oh, of course. Oh, well, I was going to say, we're going to definitely talk about that.
Yeah. That's like the number one thing. The rehabbing of Hawkeye, because Hawkeye is a character that I've always really liked. And
who's basically been a villain up to this point.
Yes. I do think of all the characters, Hawkeye is the most short-shrifted. I have my opinions as to why, but he's a character that I like, and you get to see him at his most powerful here. He also gets called Legolas, which appeals to me, a huge Lord of the Rings fan, specifically. Like Brian said earlier, Iron Man being the king of nicknames. And then, like, there's nothing as cool as Hulk punching the space slug.
Yeah.
That is like, I remember fully screaming when I saw that. And then Tony, of course, the end where Tony sort of falls from the sky.
Something that's very interesting in the Avengers Battle of New York is that they do a good job of getting every Avengers member gets a moment or gets a thing. They all get a threat and then they all get a victory. And that all happens before the giant punch, which I think is that's the thing that unites them as one unit.
Yes.
And there's like lots of little very interesting beats in here, like Hulk and Thor and all, and Hawkeye, as you were saying. But it all builds up to of course, like I think this movie is like iconic now, even a decade later. I think it was iconic a year later, where the "I'm always angry" punch, then the Alan Silvestri Avengers theme kicks up. And thank God they got a composer of the caliber of Alan Silvestri, because
I think this made Alan Silvestri, I think, in the zeitgeist.
Well, he was in
a lot of ways.
He was known before us because of Back to the Future and stuff like that. But yes, I think this guy gave him a resurgence.
Yes. Okay, then maybe I'll rephrase that. Take two. I think this really introduced Alan Silvestri to a new generation of filmmakers.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Well, I will say too, I mean, I would argue post Endgame and Infinity War, I think this theme is known in the lexicon. I think you would have a hard time finding somebody that would, if you played this piece of music for them, they wouldn't know this is the Avengers theme. And that's what drove me crazy in Avengers Age of Ultron when they didn't use it.
Right.
I was like, what? What is wrong with you? Because this theme is so good. It's iconic. And then, that circle shot that they'll show in every Marvel montage till we all die.
Yeah.
But it's also like really good. It's actually a really good shot. They all get a shine. I remember, and they spoiled in the trailers, the moment after the shot where Cap gives them all orders.
Yes.
And then he turns to Hulk and he goes, Hulk smash. I remember seeing that in trailer being like, oh my God, this movie. It's so good. And then it all builds to, the complicated, like, we got to shut the portal down. And then Tony Stark has drinks with Loki as he jumps off the building and like gets into the suit, which, by the way, physics, Tony Stark would be sidewalk pizza.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That suit could not catch him. He would still sploosh in the suit and become blood. Just pure liquid.
Sure. It is a great interaction, though, between the two of them, talking about the army and, well, we have a Hulk.
Yes.
The interaction between the two of them and Stark's maybe his first belief in this team of heroes being a force together and not just being like for this mission, but being, no, we've got a Hulk. We've got everything represented here to be able to take on whatever threat can come to Earth. And I love that.
I also will give a nod to, I appreciate the attempt to explain the title of the characters. That, like, we may not save this world, but we damn sure can avenge it.
Yes,
oh, yeah.
Right?
And you're like, all right, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. All right, sure. So
also puny human, like Hulk smashing Loki is.
Yes.
Even though we know that the face is wibbly wobbly, it's still iconic.
And I also I really like the moment where in this movie, Iron Man does the sacrifice play.
Yes.
I think the complication of the World Council, by the way, I don't like any of the World Council scenes in this movie at all. I think it should have just been Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
But I think they were like, we can't make Nick Fury too much of a villain. I mean, like dipping trading cards in people's blood is about as far as we want to. We don't want to have him launch a nuke at New York City.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll just have a B Powers booth. He's a bad guy from Deadwood.
Enough.
Yeah, he's a bad guy in 24. He can be the bad guy here.
For sure.
But I do like the moment where he's trying to call Pepper as he's like going through the portal. Now, as we'll see in later movies,
which I think is interesting because you don't love them as a couple.
I don't, not really. But
Jason loves the comic book rule that happy marries Pepper.
It's happy in Pepper. Yes, I'm very much on that thing. But I understand why you change it for a movie. But I like that moment. And then this, where he's in the weird nether space or whatever, they sort of go wishy-washy in this. This sets up the thing of where Tony Stark has that weird nightmare.
Yeah.
That they never quite explain how he knows about Thanos, or unless you just want to be like,
it's very like The Expanse when James Holden gets his visions going through the ring.
It is. They're very like, you're just like, okay, did he saw the giant army, and it's like, oh crap, there's somebody else out there. Or it's
some deleted scene where one of the Chitauri says, by the way, bigger guy, Thanos,
yes.
we'll meet him. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, or he turned his radio to the right frequency as he was in there, past soft rock, and then he heard Thanos. Oh, okay, there he is.
I do like how they don't just end that storyline for Tony with this movie, how this kind of continues to haunt him in Iron Man 3. It continues to haunt him in later movies, Civil War. This would be something that would affect you, and nearly dying out in space, cut off from everybody else. Wouldn't be a thing that you just kind of get over after having some shawarma. You'd have some long-lasting effects. And I agree.
That was one of the best things I thought about Iron Man 3.
I was gonna bring that up. Iron Man 3 is how you say a mixed bag,
flawed.
And flawed. But that I think is one of the things that it actually does really well. And Jason,
we recently talked about it.
Notably, has many issues with portrayal of things like PTSD, and doesn't hate that one. So
I like the scene where he hides from Rhodey inside his Iron Man armor. I think is a very excellent representation of PTSD in live action media. So they win the day. We get an amazing creation of a Hulk GIF that people are going to use for the next 10 years of Hulk smashing Loki, puny god. And, then the Avengers all go their separate ways. And I remember in the theaters, and I want to hear the opinion from both of you, I was a little disappointed with the ending of this movie when I first saw it, because I thought it was strange that the movie ends that the Avengers are not a team. They all go their separate ways.
Disassembled.
Yeah, they disassemble themselves. I remember being like, but wait a minute. Isn't the whole movie telling me that we have assembled and now you're all going to different places?
Yeah, what about Avengers Mansion? You guys got to go there. That's what
I know. And we set up Avengers Tower. I mean, we showed the A from Stark.
Yes.
But like, and even the World Council, like Powers Booth is like, tell me where these Avengers are. And Samuel Jackson's like, I don't know.
It felt exactly the same way. I was thinking, this has to be kind of the start of all of the Avengers films. At this point, you're even wondering, are we just going to go back to individual films again? Or are we going to have, now that we've established the whole team thing, are we going to have team movies going forward? And I knew we had some indication of what was going to be coming next in phase 2, but still, you had a long time to wait before you.
And it's interesting when we got to Age of Ultron, they started in media res where it's like, you've learned that like they've been going on missions for like the last year. Right. And you're like, I would have liked to have seen some of those missions, guys.
Yeah, exactly. So it felt like, no, I don't want to see these guys breaking up. We took so long to get them together. Let's keep them together.
Ashley, how did you feel about the wrap up, the denouement of this movie?
The denouement. I remember thinking, I didn't know that Americans were into shawarma. Because that's a huge thing in Canada, and I had been in the States for a couple of years at that point, and I'd never seen a shawarma place. Obviously there are shawarma places, and I'd never heard an American ever talk about it. And I was like,
they're popular now because of this movie.
Yeah,
it is.
I was like, wow, look at that, how cool.
Fun fact about that shawarma scene: that scene was filmed after the world premiere of the movie. They shot it at a restaurant in Hollywood, California, I believe, about a week and a half before the wide release of the movie.
It's literally in between Hollywood and Highland and Hollywood and Vine, like the two major intersections.
It's become a tourist spot now because they have signs in there that say, we are the shop from Avengers.
Because Chris Evans famously had a dark goatee for whatever he was shooting, and that's why Cap's big old glove is in front of his face.
He was shooting Snowpiercer.
Ah.
Oh, okay.
And that's he had his big Snowpiercer beard, and so they had to prosthetically put a fake chin on him, and that's the reason why Cap is like leaning on his chin weirdly. If you watch the scene, is because he's hiding the prosthetic.
I walked back my do you think a shawarma potato is like a baby joke from this speech at the end of Snowpiercer.
Oh, interesting.
I was like, that's not appropriate.
Interesting. All right. So before everybody, we get to the best actor, best legacy of the movie. Any other final thoughts, Ashley or Brian, that you would like to bring up about Marvel Studios' The Avengers, or as the Europeans got it right, Avengers Assemble?
I just love the fact that because of that shawarma scene, we now have a 2 shawarma restaurants in Disneyland in Avengers Campus where you can.
Oh, is that legit? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Named after the guy whose restaurant it was, and so the carts are covered with newspaper clippings of the Avengers as if you were in New York and seeing all these things for real. It's brilliantly done, and those shawarma places always have a line. And again, no one would even know what shawarma was.
and shawarma's good.
Very good.
Shawarma's really good. Yeah. So thank you, Robert Downey Jr., for that improv line. Ashley, any other final thoughts on The Avengers?
My final thoughts about Les Avengers le film, which is
Avengers
the movie.
Okay. How would you say the Avengers the motion picture?
Le film.
Oh, still okay. All right.
Yeah, there's
Avengers le film.
There's only, video is also a word in French, but it's for it would be like for a short, like a YouTube video.
Got it.
Le film, yeah. Les Avengers le film is that it still holds up, but it is funny to watch it through a contemporary lens.
We'll talk about the two. Does it hold up? We'll get into that.
Yeah. No, this was fun. This was fun to revisit.
All right. So our first category, we're going to start with you, Mr. Ibbott.
Okay.
Who do you think is the best actor in this film?
Well, it's Harry Dean Stanton. It's got
Of course it is. Thank you, sir.
For me, I think Chris Evans, because he's got so many things that he's got to wrestle with for this role. He's a man out of time. He's a fish out of water. He's so all this stuff he's seeing is new to him. And then he's got to team up with a giant green creature and, a guy in an armor and in a big metal suit and a god, and still feel like he can take charge when he needs to, as being the kind of ipso facto leader of the Avengers. I think it's a great performance by Chris Evans, who will always be my Captain America.
Oh, yeah, I think so. He's definitely earned that role. Ashley, who's the best actor in the Avengers?
It's a tough question because there are a lot of actors who I think are very talented who are not given very much to do.
Like Harry Dean Stanton. I know.
Yes, in this. And then there are characters playing leads in this who I think are charismatic, and that's enough to play a superhero sometimes. And then I think there are some actors who are very good, who are given absolute nonsense to have to contend with. And because of that, I'm going to keep the joke going, and I'm going to say Tom Hiddleston is the best actor in this.
That's a fair choice, I think.
Because it is like, I love him in this movie the way I love Andrew Scott playing Moriarty in the BBC Sherlock.
Oh, interesting.
He has the dumbest things to say, and he has to make them threatening. And the fact that he even kind of pulls it off, I find deeply, deeply impressive. And I think a non-Shakespearean trained actor couldn't have even pretended to be scary.
We didn't even bring up Glorious Purpose. That ridiculous line has become a meme.
I have been burdened with a glorious like what? Like that is something that you write on the scratch sides for the audition, and you're like, whoever's scary gets this part.
Yep.
All right, Jason, who do you think was the best actor?
Well, the joke answer would be Alexis Denisof as the five-fingered Thanos guy.
I mean, we do love him.
He's a great actor. But I actually think it's Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner, because I think the real juice of this movie, and I do think...
What kind of juice, though?
I'm going to go with grape juice. I do agree that this is probably Cap's movie more than any of the other Avengers, but I think this movie lives or dies on the Hulk, on whether or not the audience buys that the Hulk is a hero and empathetic and that we can get behind him. And I think it's 100% Mark Ruffalo who carries that weight and actually makes us love him. It's interesting, too, because he had a heavy burden with this because he was replacing Edward Norton.
Who's also a great actor.
Who's also a great actor. And it's in my research for this podcast, I learned apparently they're close friends because they did a play together. And apparently like Mark Ruffalo didn't take this part until he got Edward Norton's permission. And Edward Norton was like, yeah, man, do it. I'm not going to hold you back from that. And it's funny because he
knew he burned that bridge himself.
He did burn that bridge. But there's Mark Ruffalo has given interviews where he says like, he was like, my favorite Hulk actor is Edward Norton. And Edward Norton has given interviews that he's like, my favorite Hulk actor is Mark Ruffalo. So they've come to an accord, but I think it's Mark Ruffalo. I think it was so because he played Bruce Banner differently than we'd ever seen it before. And also I think he's the first actor ever where you could feel he was also the Hulk. Fun fact, I didn't realize this before. This is the first movie ever that let an actor get in a mocap suit and portray the role. Well, I know Gollum was the first one, but this was the first
superhero movie.
This was the first one where they actually made the person look like the person.
Oh, like the Hulk looks like Mark Ruffalo.
Because the Hulk looks like Mark Ruffalo. So this was like the first, and this is apparently the movie that is accredited to like letting more and more movies do that. So I could be wrong on that, but that's what I read in my research.
Anyways. I'm glad they did.
So yeah, Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk and Bruce Banner. Brian, what do you think is the overall theme message of this movie? What do you think about this? And in terms of the legacy of this movie, does 2012's The Avengers hold up to a 2022 lens?
I think so. It does because of reasons that they weren't expecting. You know, the unity. It's so hard not to look at unity and trust and teamwork. This all seems like big posters that I had in my office in the 90s, but as being the
hang in there, kitty.
That's right. Exactly.
Hang in there, Avenger.
Right. It's almost Friday. But no, the legacy of this thing is evident in how many more recent Marvel projects not just reference it, but revisit it. Hawkeye, the Hawkeye series spent some time with footage from this film and added new footage around this film. Black Widow, Loki, and Loki even adding on to the stuff we got in Endgame that added on to this film. It's if a movie didn't have a lasting legacy and it was easily dismissible, you wouldn't have so many things that still borrow from it and just outright grab scenes from it today. And I think that's a great representation of how well this thing holds up. Do the suits hold up? Maybe not as much, or at least specifically Captain America's suit. But this being the start of redemption arcs for Tony Stark, for Loki, for primarily for those
Harry Dean Stanton.
Harry Dean Stanton. Thank you. I always like things in threes, so I was really struggling to find my third. But you'd absolutely help me with that. Yes, but having this be the redemption arcs for those two characters, it's absolutely a testament to the legacy of this film.
Ashley, how about you? What do you think is the legacy? Does this movie hold up in 2022?
The movie holds up, but it holds up under different standards, which is a little bit wild because it's not that old, but we have seen so much change and come and go from when this movie happened, which I think is why it baffles when sometimes you see contemporary movies that feel like they were made in the 90s or the 80s, for example, and that's not necessarily their intention. So this is you have to meet it where it is, and it's really not even that old, just because our perspective has shifted so much. What's its legacy? Literally everything that's come after this.
That's fair.
I mean, the Arrowverse owes to this. The Boys owes to this. A ton of contemporary stuff that's not even in the same. Avengers comic books owe to this. This is now the lineup. For good or for ill, this is your, to borrow the Justice League term, this is your big seven.
Mm-hmm.
Even though some of these characters were like only auxiliary Avengers, or like Hawkeye kept quitting and making their own Avengers teams and then turning evil and then dying and not being dead anymore.
In the comics.
Yeah. But now like Hawkeye is permanently in the discussion when we're talking about an Avengers roster. So it's a little bit.
And so is Black Widow, even though Black Widow is a villain.
Yes.
Well, Hawkeye was a villain too. But
yes. It's a bit humbling to think that pretty much everything that touches on this genre is going to owe to this because it was such a landmark. In the same, I would say the same thing about Batman 89. And I think that movie is even sillier by contemporary sensibilities. But like there's a line again from Batman to Avengers and from Avengers into, I don't know, Morbius that's coming out. Or maybe not Morbius. Maybe Morbius hasn't taken the lessons, but Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot that owes to this. And this is going to be a movie, and this is going to seem wild. This movie is going to be taught in film school.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. We will still talk about this movie 20 years later in the same breath that we talk about Superman the movie and Batman and stuff like that. For me, it's funny thinking about this. Does this movie hold up? It is interesting to see how far, and it's just because like Marvel has like pumped out 2 to 3 to 4 movies a year between now and the last 10 years, how different their storytelling is, because the pace of this is sometimes it seems quite slow. And I don't think this movie is slow at all. I think it trucks at a pretty good pace. But compared to now, you're like, oh, yeah, like this. But you have to think about that back then they had to really hold the hand of the audience through every aspect. And now we're just throwing Doctor Strange in a movie. And it's like, if you don't know who Doctor Strange is, I don't care.
Right.
And we're just moving on.
We don't need setup. We don't need introduction.
We've lost the setup on everything. So that's I think the only thing that kind of dates it besides the costumes and the CGI.
And CG's a losing battle.
Oh, you're all
no matter what.
All special effects are.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to judge them the time they come on. But it's interesting, like you talk about the legacy, because there are 3 movies, and Avengers is one of these movies in terms of superhero movies that I judge that will have the impact of like the original trilogy of Star Wars. So here's my analogy. The new hope of superhero movies is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in 2002. Because that's the movie that like knocks everybody's socks off because nobody thought they could do web swinging. And as soon as you do web swinging, everybody's like, oh my God, we can do any superhero. The Empire Strikes Back of superhero movies is The Dark Knight in 2008. Because that was the movie that proved like, oh, you can like push the envelope. You can make a superhero movie actually be serious cinema. Because that's a film. That's not a movie.
Yeah.
And then I think The Avengers is The Return of the Jedi. And the reason why it's The Return of the Jedi is because it's just as lauded. And it does set the tone. But if you look at like what George Lucas did with the prequels feel more like Return of the Jedi than they do the other 2. And so that's why all the other superhero movies post this movie.
Okay, now do the
like
analogy,
Avengers.
But for Star Trek movies.
Oh boy!
Be true to your brand. You don't have to.
Okay, let's see here.
Khan is
Wrath of Khan is maybe Batman 89. And then Final Frontier is Blade Trinity.
No. Here it is. Wrath of Khan is Batman 89.
Okay.
First Contact is The Dark Knight, and 09 is Avengers.
That's fair. That's a fair. Well done, Alice. Actually, well done.
Thank you for letting me answer my own question.
Yes, I was so worried because I was like, I don't know for all 13. I don't know.
Oh no, I was not going to make you do all 13.
That's great. All right, Brian, we're here on a scale of 1 to 5 Bregos, our intern GHL cat, who's not even in the studio right now. 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. What rating would you give Marvel Studios' The Avengers?
Because of all the things that it sets up that we're still getting payoffs from, and because of just how monumental it was, not having seen anything like that in superhero film before and having it work so well, I'm giving it 4 1/4.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Ashley, how about you?
It's interesting. I am inclined to give it 4.5. We'll go with the front half of Intern Brego, because if you would have asked me this maybe 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I probably would have given it a solid 5. But we have seen the medium pushed forward in more interesting ways than this movie did, but it's because of what this movie did. So I think it deserves to be lauded, but it's not my favorite Marvel movie anymore. And that's okay. But I still think like I would be happy to watch this at any time.
Sure.
You're never twisting my arm to watch Avengers. So how about you, Jason?
I'm going to give this a 3.5.
Oh, he said no, thank you. That's still actually a really great.
Oh no,
rating.
it's better than the rest.
Absolutely.
And I agree with you. Time has changed my perspective on this. And now that I'm further away from the gee golly, oh my God, I think other Avengers movies have done this better.
Yes.
Yes. Now a lot of that is just like, bigger threats and they've worked through the kinks and they've gotten better. But man, this movie is still really solid. But I agree with you. Like, I don't know if I go back to rewatch this one a lot. Mm-hmm. I think I would rewatch some of the later Avengers films more. Mm. And that always determines my rating. So that's why I'm going to give it a 3.5. All right. Awesome, everybody. So our recommended reading, which you can find at geekhistoryLesson.com/recommended reading. You can find, of course, will be the Avengers films and maybe a couple of books on the making of Avengers.
We'll also put on some recommended listening if people want to pick up some of the cool CDs that Brian has produced over the years.
Sure. Identity is a great one. If you like that Avengers theme, listen to it in jazz format.
Ooh, all right. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Stitcher and Spotify and all the places you put podcasts in your ear holes. Brian, you host so many amazing podcasts. Please tell the listeners where they can find you online and where they can listen to some more amazing stuff you got coming up in the future.
Yeah, so Coverville. If you put Coverville after any.com that's out there right now, social media-wise, you'll probably find me. MySpace, Friendster. I mean, I think probably still there somewhere.
Friendster, wow.
But it's a deep cut. But yeah, that's the easiest way to find me. We are just now coming out with season 4. Like the first episodes drop this week of America's Next Top Podcaster. We're looking for beginning podcasters who really want to push their abilities and push their experience dealing with a wide variety of problems that come up during podcasting that we're nice enough to throw at them. You can find that over at americasnexttoppodcaster.com. Of course, the morning stream 5 days a week, film sack every week, and so much more.
By the way, myspace.com/Coverville is still up.
Is it really?
It is.
Does it show me? Am I on there?
Yeah, and Brian Ibbott, there's a nice picture of you.
Is Tom still his friend?
He's not in his top 8.
How many dancing Spider-Men are in the background?
There should be. It should be all dancing Spider-Man.
So it's funny because there's nothing that shows up except your top 8, your picture, and your name. So there's like no other information available, but you're technically still squatting on the URL.
Nice.
I love it. That's great. I've never given that up. Oh yeah, Richard Cheese is still listed over there. That's great.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Well, everybody, if you want to hear more of Brian, and we're going to be talking about some of his favorite comic book movies over at the Patreon at patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin. There's an episode of GHL Extra every single week. So come on over, support the podcast, and get more of Brian. Brian, thank you again so much for joining us on this, just Harry Dean Stanton love fest of a podcast.
That's exactly what it was. Thank you guys so much for having me.
And everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Thank you so much for listening to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason. Are you sure you're not an alien, Inman?
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. And Professor Jason, would you please dismiss the class?
Class is now dismissed.